I believe we are by the two dots on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, where it says Chutz Mina Almana V'chule. So just in the Mishnah, I'll recap a drop. In the Mishnah, we had three opinions about Havchana, about a woman getting married after she separates from her husband or her husband dies. So the first opinion was every woman has to wait 3 months. I don't care if she's pregnant or not, if she's a katana, it doesn't make a difference. She has to wait 3 months. That was the first opinion. Second opinion was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that no, she's allowed to have kiddushin because she's not going to get pregnant. She's not having bia within 3 months. Or if she's a bitula, if let's say she didn't have bia, she only had kiddushin, and then her husband died or divorced her, then she could get married right away. And then the last opinion was Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi held that an almana is not allowed to get married for the first 30 days because she has avelut. So Amar Rav Chisda kal vachomer. So Rav Chisda says, I have a kal vachomer that an almana should be allowed to get married within her shloshim. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit avelut related just for the beginning. So, Uma b'mkom she'asur lechabes mutar li'ares, makom she'mutar lechabes and odin she'mutar li'ares. In a scenario where a woman is where someone is in a position where they're not allowed to do laundry because of avelut, they're still allowed to do kiddushin. So, in a place where they're allowed to do laundry, for sure they should be allowed to do kiddushin. Now, what are we saying? So the Gemara explains. Maihi, what's this kal vachomer exactly? Ditnat. Shabbat shechal tisha be'av betocha, asur lesaper ulchabes, uv'chamishim mutar nikvod haShabbat. That a person is not allowed to do laundry or take haircuts on Shavua shechal bo Tisha B'av. The week of Tisha B'av, a person is not allowed to do laundry or take haircuts. V'tanya, kodem azman hazeh, הממעטין בעסקיהם מליסה ומליתן מלבנות ולנטוע ומארסין אבל לא קונסין ואין עושים סעודת אירוסין. There's another brighta that teaches also before this time, presumably before Tisha B'av, in the week of Tisha B'av. We're assuming that this is referring to the week of Tisha B'av. A person has to diminish his business dealings and planting and building, things that bring simcha have to be diminished. But he's allowed to ma'arisin, he's allowed to do kiddushin. So what do you see? Because of the avelut of Tisha B'av, a person is not allowed to do laundry, but he's still allowed to do kiddushin. So a woman who's in shloshim, an almana who's in her shloshim, she's allowed to do laundry. After 7 days, after Shiva, she's allowed to do laundry. So if she's allowed to do laundry, for sure she should be allowed to do kiddushin. Meaning, if when avelut is so strong that you cannot do laundry, you could still do kiddushin. When avelut is weaker and you could do laundry, for sure you should be able to do kiddushin. So that's the kal vachomer. So the Gemara says, no, kitanya kodim de kodim. This brighta is talking about not the week of Tisha B'av, it's talking about before that, meaning it's talking about the time frame before the week of Tisha B'av. So we're not talking about a time where you're allowed to do laundry, where you're not allowed to, not Shavuot Shechal, meaning laundry would be mutar when Erusin is mutar. So we don't have any kal vachomer anymore. So, Amar Rava, v'kodim dekodim nami kal vachomer. Rava says, still I have a kal vachomer. What's the kal vachomer? Uma b'mkom she'asur lisa v'liten mutar li'ares. When you're allowed to do business, meaning the beforehand of Tisha B'av, we said that you have to diminish simcha, you have to diminish certain business ventures that bring simcha. And we're not talking about things that are a person is doing for basic parnasa. We're talking about additional business ventures that a person is bringing that brings a person, simcha. So a person has to diminish that. So in a situation where avelut is strong enough that he has to diminish business, still mutar li'ares, he's allowed to do kiddushin. So makom shemutar li savliten, when avelut is not strong enough that he has to diminish business, for example, after Shiva, for the whole shloshim, he's allowed to go back to work and do business like regular. Ein odin shemutar li'ares, he should be allowed to do erusin. So an almana within 30 days after the Shiv'ah, before Shloshim, she should be allowed to accept Kiddushin. During the Shiv'ah, she shouldn't be, but during the Shloshim, she should be. So the Gemara says, you're right. Therefore, it doesn't make sense that Rabbi Yossi is saying that an almana is not allowed to do Kiddushin during the 30 days. So, lo tema de Rabbi Yossi omer kol nashim itarasu. Don't say that Rabbi Yossi is allowing every type of woman, meaning the opinion of Rabbi Yossi was everybody could have erusin within 3 months after her husband dies, or between 3 months after separating from her husband, because she's not gonna become pregnant. We're not allowing nisuin. We're allowing just erusin. That's what we thought Rabbi Yossi was saying. So the Gemara says, don't say that. Ella ema kol nashim yinasu. Rather, Rabbi Yossi is saying any woman who separates from her husband is allowed to get married within 3 months, except for an almana. If the first month she cannot get married. That's the Gemara is saying. That's what Rabbi Yossi is saying. I mean, we're changing. We're gonna go back, but for now we're changing what Rabbi Yossi was saying.
You mean almana cannot get married?
For the first 30 days, because she's in avelut, that her husband died. So for 30 days she cannot have nisuin.
The same with the husband.
Anyone who's in avelut, meaning Rabbi Yossi is saying halacha in avelut, it would apply to anyone who's in avelut. So just to clarify, what Rabbi Yossi had originally said was the way we understood Rabbi Yossi was, he said that a woman who separates from her husband, she's allowed to have kiddushin because she's not going to get pregnant, so she's allowed to have kiddushin within 3 months. The Gemara said, and then he said, but an almana is different. The first month she can't. So the Gemara questioned that. So it doesn't make sense. An almana should be able to have nisuin. Should be able to have kiddushin. What's the problem? Kiddushin is not an issue of avelut. So Rabbi Yossi, so the Gemara says, no. What Rabbi Yossi was saying was not that a lady is allowed to have kiddushin. He's saying a lady is allowed to have nisuin. She's allowed to fully get married within 3 months after separating from her husband. And almana is different, that for the first month she cannot. So the Gemara says, why?
Huh?
Why?
Because if somebody gets almana, the lady,
Yeah.
get married after 3 months, after 1 month, everybody think about.
Oh, you're saying like that?
She was waiting for the husband to go and get married with that guy. You know what I mean? It doesn't look good.
Okay, I'm saying you could have situations where that's not a factor. No, I'm serious. You could have situations where the husband's in the hospital for a long time and already anyways she would, Okay, so the Gemara questions, 1 second. So you're telling me Rabbi Yossi holds that a lady is allowed to get married after her husband divorces her? He doesn't hold that you have to wait 3 months to know who the father of the child is. We just had spent a whole amud before discussing that different reasons why it's important to know who the father is, either because the Shekhinah is only there when you have yuchasin that are properly, you know who's who, or because we have different concerns that someone's not going to know which family he's from and he's going to end up marrying a relative that he's not allowed to marry. So Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold of any of this. So the Gemara says, lately, yeah, Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold of it. V'baitema, or let's shift gears and I can explain to you that Lo'olam idle. Really, Rabbi Yossi does hold that you have to wait 3 months after separating from a husband to get married. So ve'ema, Rabbi Yossi Omer, and this is what Rabbi Yossi's opinion is, that kol arusot gerushot yinasu. Anyone who never had bia, she's just an arusa. She was engaged, she had kiddushin to someone, and then her husband divorced her, so then she's allowed to get married within 3 months. That's what he's talking about. Right? So the Gemara says, Hachi hainu Rabbi Yehuda. So then that's the same thing as Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara says. The Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Ika benayu nisua liares. They're having a machloket about a woman who was fully married. Can she and her husband left her, so can she do kiddushin? So Rabbi Yehuda savar nisua muteret liares. Rabbi Yehuda holds that someone who was married fully, she's not a betula, her husband divorces her, she's allowed to have erusin. V'Rebbi Yossi savar nisua asura liyares. And Rabbi Yossi holds that a woman who is married is not allowed to remarry within 3 months. Meaning, there's two scenarios where things should be okay. What's the whole reason that we have to wait 3 months after a woman separates from her husband before she can get married to somebody else? Because we want to make sure she's not pregnant. After 3 months of being separate from her husband, we know that we're confident to say she's not pregnant and she could get married. But within 3 months, we're worried she might get married, and if she has a baby, we're not going to know who the father is. So that's why we have to wait 3 months. Fine. There's two scenarios where this will be inapplicable. Number one, if she never was with her husband, if she only got kiddushin, and then her husband divorced her or died. So that's one case where it shouldn't be applicable. That we're saying both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi agree. There's another case where she had bia. It could be that she's pregnant from her first husband, but we're not allowing her to fully marry. We're just allowing her to accept kiddushin.
You have to wait 3 months. For if she had bia, you have to wait 3 months.
So 1 second. So this, if she had bia and her husband, she was fully married to her husband, and then her husband divorced her. So machloket, to have a full marriage again, she has to wait 3 months. But to just accept kiddushin, that's a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda says she's allowed to accept kiddushin. She's not having bia. She has to wait 3 months to do the chuppah and nisuin and have bia. But before that, she can accept kiddushin. Rabbi Yossi says no, because we're worried if she accepts kiddushin, then it's gonna go to the next step. Right, not go crazy, but we're worried that they'll come to do chuppah as well. Okay, so that's what we're saying is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi at this point. So the Gemara says, "V'sab Rabbi Yossi nisua asura liares." What you're telling me, Rabbi Yossi holds that a woman who was once married cannot accept kiddushin. She can accept kiddushin according to Rabbi Yossi. V'atani Rabbi Yossi omer kol hanashim yit'aresu chutz mina almana mimnei ha'ibul. Rabbi Yossi says clearly that all of the women are allowed to have erusin, except for an almana, because of avelut. She's not allowed to have erusin. V'kama ibul shela 30 yom. Her avelut is 30 days. V'kulam lo yinasu, and all women cannot get fully married at shiyu lahen 3 chodashim, until they wait 3 months. So the Gemara says, I have a question from this Braita. So the Gemara says, okay, 1 second. Hi, my kushya. What's exactly your question from this Braita? Right? The Gemara is gonna clarify. Right? There's 2 parts of the Braita that we could potentially ask a question from. The Gemara says, what's our question? Ilema diktani Rabbi Yossi omer kol hanashim yit'aresu. So you're gonna tell me the question is because Rabbi Yossi says all women are allowed to have erusin. So that presumably could mean that sounds like a woman who was married and her husband died or divorced or whatever, she could have kiddushin. That's what it sounds like. And we just said Rabbi Yossi holds you can't have kiddushin, right? We said that's the machloket Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Can a woman whose husband divorced her have kiddushin within 3 months? So it sounds like over here it says kol hanashim yit'aresu, they're allowed to have kiddushin. So that's not like what we tried to explain. Rabbi Yossi holds. So the Gemara says that if that's what you're asking, that's not a problem. This is no different than the Mishnah. We could say that we're talking about ladies who didn't have bia. They're allowed to have kiddushin. Ladies who just had erusin, they're allowed to have kiddushin. Right? Inasu achanami kol arusot gerushot inasu. It's talking about a lady who's in arusa gerusha. She had kiddushin, and then the guy who gave her kiddushin divorced her, and now she wants to have kiddushin again, or even nisuin. That would be allowed. Ella miseifa. So what's the question from this Braita on how we're explaining Rabbi Yossi from the Seifa? Dektani v'chulan. It said in the Braita, all of these women lo yinasu ad shiyu lahen 3 chodashim. They cannot have nisuin until they complete 3 months. So what do we see from here? Insuvihu delo. It says they cannot have nisuin. They cannot get married fully for 3 months. Ha'itruse shaper dami. But just to have kiddushin, it sounds like they could, meaning we're making a diuk that it says in the Braita, Rabbi Yossi says that a woman who separates from her husband, she's not allowed to have nisuin for 3 months. It sounds like she's allowed to accept kiddushin, she just can't get fully married. So Amar Rava, so Rava says, no, I have an explanation of this Braita. Taritz ve'ema'achi. We're gonna answer up the Braita like this, that this is how the Braita, this is what the Braita really means. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol arusot girushot yinaseu, chutz min almana. So any arusa girusha, a woman who was once mi'ureset, she only had kiddushin, and then she divorced from that kiddushin, so she's allowed to get married, except for an almana, unless the guy died. He gave her kiddushin and he died. Then mimnei ibul, she's not allowed to marry because of avelut. V'kama ibul shela 30 yom, that's 30 days of avelut. Unisuot, and if a woman was fully married, lo yit'arisu ad she'ela in 3 chodashim, she cannot have erusin for 30 days. V'almana, so now
at the end of the day, all these cases have to wait 3 months.
No. So at the end of the day, what we're saying at this point is as follows: that if a woman she only had kiddushin, so if her husband divorced her, she's allowed to get married right away. She doesn't have to wait 3 months. We know she's not pregnant. If she only had kiddushin and her husband died, she has to wait 1 month because of avelut. A man came and was mekadesh. A regular man was mekadesh her. If he divorces her, she could get married to somebody else right away. If he dies, she has to wait 30 days because of avelut. That's if she was only mikudeshet.
Somebody could make kiddushin for a lady when she's already married?
No, she's not married.
Except after when she died, then could wait 3 months.
There's a single lady, okay? Single lady, yeah.
No marriage.
Someone comes and gives her kiddushin. Okay. If he divorces her, they never had bia, only kiddushin. If he divorces her, she's allowed to get married right away, according to Rabbi Yossi. If he dies, she has to wait 1 month because of avelut before she can get married. Okay, simple. The guy that her husband she was mikudeshet. Yeah. Oh, so you're saying why is there avelut if he's only? Okay, good. That's the Gemara's question. Beautiful. That's what the Gemara is going to ask right now. But we're saying that she's in avelut for that guy that gave her kiddushin, like as if it's her husband. So that's exactly the question of the Gemara. So says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, "Va'almana mina irusin mi'it la'ibul." What an almana, that her guy who gave her kiddushin died. So she's an almana from kiddushin only, right? She wasn't fully married yet. She didn't have chuppah, she didn't have bia, she just had kiddushin, and then the guy died. There's no avelut over there. There's avelut over there. Va'atani Rabbi Chia bar Ami. Rabbi Chia bar Ami taught, ishto arusa. Someone who only has kiddushin with a lady, meaning it's his wife, but not a full 100% wife of chuppah, a wife just of erusin. Lo onen, if she dies, he's not an onen. Velo mitamela, he doesn't. If he's a kohen, who's normally allowed to be tameh to his wife, not this type of wife because they weren't fully married. V'chen he, and also her, if the husband dies, lo onenet, she doesn't have aninut or avelut. Velo mitame'alo, she doesn't have to become tameh to him. Meta, if she dies, eno yorsha, he does not yoresh her like a regular wife. These are all not like a regular full wife. Met who, if he dies, gova ktubata, she just collects her ktuba money if the ktuba was already signed. No, the ktuba could technically be from, you could have a ktuba before by Erusin also, yeah. So if Rashi says if they had such a ktuba at that time, then she would collect it. So, but what do you see from here? You see that there's no avelut. When there's only kiddushin, there's no avelut. That's not a full husband and wife for avelut. Only if there's real nisuin. So how can you tell me Rabbi Yossi says we're talking about a lady who accepted kiddushin and then the guy died? She has to wait 30 days. What 30 days? There's no avelut. So ella tenaihi. So rather the Gemara says you're right. We're gonna go back to the way we originally understood that Rabbi Yossi is talking about He does not allow a woman to do nisuin, right? We're talking about erusin, right? Like we said on the previous amud. We had a question. We had a kal v'chomer. We said 1 second, Rabbi Yossi, you're not allowing a woman to have erusin because of avelut. She's not allowed to accept kiddushin because of avelut. We had a kal v'chomer. We said, what are you talking about? Leading up to Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to do business, but you're allowed to accept kiddushin. So during shloshim, you're allowed to do business. For sure, you should be allowed to accept kiddushin. So the Gemara says that's not so simple. Rabbi Yossi doesn't agree with that. Tanaihi, that's really a machloket Tanaim. The Tanya, Rosh Chodesh vad haTa'anit, from Rosh Chodesh until the Ta'anit, which means until Tisha B'Av. Ha'am mema'atin miskehen. Everybody diminishes their asakim, their business dealings. Milisa umiliten, from doing masa umatan, business. Milivnot velintoa, from building and planting. Miliares umilisa, from erusin and nisuin. So you see here that erusin is kiddushin is also not allowed. So that's what Rabbi Yossi holds. Rabbi Yossi holds kiddushin is not allowed as well, leading up to Tisha B'Av, and therefore you have no kal v'chomer to say, oh, if it's allowed before Tisha B'Av, when all these other things are asur, for sure it should be allowed when all those other things are mutar. Not true. It's not allowed. And Shabbat shechal Tisha B'Av betocha, the week of Tisha B'Av, it's more strict. Asur l'saper lechabes. You cannot have haircut or laundry. V'yeshomrim kol hachodesh asur. Some say it's the whole month of Av is asur. From the beginning of the month is asur for laundry as well. Okay, but either way, you see from here, we're trying to suggest that really the machloket is the way we originally understood. That Rabbi Yossi says an almana, a woman whose husband died, she is not allowed to receive kiddushin for 30 days. And Rabbi Yehuda will say, no, she is. And the machloket is whether that's part of the avilut and it's asur to receive kiddushin during shloshim. Rabbi Yehuda will say, no, that's not part of avilut. It's allowed because it's allowed before Tisha B'Av when you're not allowed to, when you're allowed to do business and all those things. It is also allowed. Rabbi Yossi says, no, this is not allowed as well. Okay. Says the Gemara, Mat kifla Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi asks on this. He says, Mimai de liares mamash. How do you know that this is saying that she's allowed to receive kiddushin? I'm sorry, that she's not allowed to receive kiddushin during these 30 days. How do you know that's what it means? Maybe what it means is that she's not allowed to make a seudah. Because even according to the opinion that a woman is allowed to receive kiddushin, or a man could be mekadesh a lady leading up to Tisha B'Av, he's not allowed to make a seudah for it. So over here when it says ma'arisin, you're not allowed to umiliares umilisa, you're not allowed to have kiddushin. Maybe it means you're not allowed to have a seudah for kiddushin. Maybe that's what it means. And really kiddushin itself would be mutar. So dilma leme'ebat seudat erusin huda asur. Hali aretz shapir dami. But to do actual erusin would be mutar. So Gemara says, Yachi milisa linase nami leme'ebat seudat nisuin huda asur. Ha lisa shapir dami. The next word is milisa. It says you're not allowed to have kiddushin or nisuin. Now, if you're telling me kiddushin means the seudah, the simcha of it, but the actual, giving over of the kiddushin, that should be mutar. Just the seudah is asur. So what? By getting married, also the actual chuppah and kiddushin should be mutar. Just the seudah is asur. That doesn't make sense. Right? That doesn't make sense. Bishlama nisuin below seudah ika simcha. Nisuin by itself is a simcha, because the chuppah and the nisuin is the person's going to have biyah, he's going to be muteret to this woman. That itself is a simcha, even without a seudah. Ela erusin below seudah mika simcha, but erusin, just engagement, just giving over kiddushin. She's not muteret to you yet. So it doesn't have such a simcha. Only the seudah and the party makes it a simcha. But the actual act of kiddushin, that's not a simcha because she's not muteret to you. So Ella Amar Rav Ashi, rather the Gemara says, Shani avilut chadesha me'avilut yeshana, Shani avilut derabim me'avilut deyachid. There's a difference between, you can't bring a kal vachomer from leading up to Tisha B'Av, because avilut Tisha B'Av is avilut yeshana. It's an old avilut, and therefore it's not as strong and as fresh as a new avilut of someone dying. Also, it's an avilut derabim, and therefore it's not as strong as an avilut on an individual. For the Rabbim, we're not as strict as for an individual. Therefore, even though there are certain things that maybe are allowed on leading up to Tisha B'Av, like Kiddushin, but for an individual, it wouldn't be allowed. So that's how Rav Ashi is explaining Rabbi Yossi. So it comes out that according to Rabbi Yossi, the way Rav Ashi is explaining, that for an individual, when they're individually in Avelut, they cannot accept Kiddushin, because that's a stronger Avelut than leading up to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is for the Rabbim, and therefore it's not as strong of an Avelut, and they can accept Kiddushin leading up to Tisha B'Av to a certain point, but not for Avelut of a Yachid. And on that, Rabbi Yehuda would argue and say, no. Okay, let's go a little bit further just to get a little bit into the next Mishnah. Next Mishnah is much lighter, much easier Mishnah and Gemara. So, Arba'a Achin, Nisuin, Arba Nashim. So 4 brothers married to 4 ladies. They're not sisters, they're just random ladies. All from, all different ladies. V'metu, and they all die. So Im Ratzah Gadol Shebahem, if the oldest brother, one brother obviously is alive, the oldest brother, he wants Liyabem et Kulan, he wants to do Yibum to all 4 of those ladies, Harishut Beyado. He can do that. Because they're not sisters, they're not related to each other, they're not arayot. He could do that. He could marry, he could do yibum to all 4.
All of them?
Yeah, one brother dies, he does yibum to his wife. Next brother dies, he does yibum. He could do yibum multiple times. Misha haya nasui lishtei nashim. Somebody who's married to 2 women, v'met, and he died. So biata o chalitzata shel achad mehem poteret tzarata. The brother has to do yibum or chalitza to only one of them, and that covers the other one. Haita achad kshira v'achad pisula. Let's say those 2 ladies, one of them was a grusha. I mean, one of them was kasher to keuna, one of them was pasul keuna. One of them was a grusha, already she was divorced before, and one of them was not. So, im haya cholet lepsula. If he wants to do chalitza to the one who's already anyways pasul to keuna. And if he wants to do yibum, he could do yibum to the kasher one. Okay, so says the Gemara, Arba'a Achin, you said there's 4 brothers and they all died. So Arba'a Achin Salkadat, well, you think there's only 4 brothers? If they all died, who's left to do Yibum? It sounds like you're saying, there's 4 brothers and they all die. So who's left to do Yibum? So the Gemara is just clarifying, Ela Ema Arba'a Me'achin. It's 4 of the brothers, meaning there's multiple brothers. There's 5, 6, however many brothers. 4 of them die, so one of the oldest remaining brother could be miyabem all of them. Let's go a little bit further. So harishut biyado, we said he has rishut to do yibum to all of them. So Gemara says v'shav kule. Well, we let him do yibum. We let him marry 5 women. V'atanya. We have a bright that teaches v'karulu zugnei ro. Hen velo shiluchim. The zekenim, not any shaliach. The zekenim go directly to the guy who's gonna do the yibum or chalitza. V'dibru elav. It says dibru elav. They talk to him. So what do they say? So melamed shemaisin lo etza hogenet lo. They tell him advice of what's proper to do. Sheim hayahu yeled, if he's young, vehi zekena, and the yevama is an older woman, or hu zaken vehi yalda, or he's older and the yevama is a younger lady. Omrim lo malacha etzel yalda, malacha etzel zekena. They try to come in. Listen, don't do yibum in this situation, and basically in situations where. So klach etzel shekamotcha, go to somebody who's better suited for you. So we see from here they try to persuade him, even though yibum is a mitzvah, but in certain cases they try to persuade him to do what makes sense for his position. So don't put yourself in a situation where it's going to lead to fighting, and don't do that. So this guy, they're gonna tell him to marry 4 ladies. It's a financial burden of supporting 4 ladies, and why would they advise him to do that? So the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha de'ef sharle." He has the money for it. We're not talking about some. You're right. If it's somebody who maybe has problems supporting 4 ladies, okay, fine. But he has the money for it. He has the means for it. So the Gemara says, "Yach afilu tu vanami." Yeah. So the Gemara says, "Yach afilu tu vanami." If that's the case, then why only 4? He can marry 10. I don't know. He can do yibum to as many as he wants. So Gemara says, "Etzah tova kamashma." It's teaching us etzah tova that dalidin tefelo. 4 is good. More than 4, not so much. Why? So he could at least get to once a week if he's to be with one of them, right? That we know.
Is it halacha that you cannot marry more than 4?
No, there's no. Well, nowadays we have a cherem of Rabbeinu Gershom, but barring that, there's no cap, there's no limit. There's no limit. But he's saying etzah tova, it's a good etzah not to have more than 4 wives. Why? Because that way you can at least once a month get to.
That's why he's so happy this morning.
Yeah, Menachem, why you missed it?